Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana episode. In this video, I'm doing some happy, colorful stamping to boost my mood, and I encourage you to do the same. I'm using the Waves Builder stamp set to create a colorful background for my card. I love this stamp set because each section is separate, allowing me to stamp it in different colors of ink without the need to do any masking. Easy peasy. I also have my Misty stamping tool and a white cardstock panel. This is Simon Says Stamp, 120-pound cardstock. I love this paper for stamping. It is super thick and it's very nice and smooth, and it always gives me the most perfect stamped results. I also have a selection of the Simon Says Stamp positively saturated inks going from purple to pink to orange and yellow. And this is going to be the color combo for my card. So lots of bright and cheerful colors that are sure to boost the mood. Now, before I do any stamping, I need to remove the black foam pad from my Misty. I'm using the cling stamps today, and since the cling stamps are thicker than the clear stamps, the back foam pad has to go. I'm starting from the bottom and going to stamp each section individually and move up until I stamp every single one of them. The first color I'm using is Amethyst. It is a nice, deep purple, not too deep, and not too dark, but just right. I'm stamping this background onto two panels, just in case. I always do this in case I mess one of my backgrounds up, which I often do. Besides, I'm using the Misty tool, so I might as well stamp multiples. Now, I did use just one of the panels for my card because I only made one card, but I kept the other panel with my stamp set for any future projects I might want to make. So I wiped the stamp clean, but I didn't remove it just yet. I took the next part from my clear sheet and I aligned it with a stamp that I had already positioned on the door of my Misty. Now you can align each consecutive section with the stamping that you have on your background. And this way you can even align it so that the sections, connect and there's no white gap between them. So you have options here, but I wanted to do this a little bit differently. I wanted to have a bit of white space. So the next color I used was Taffy. It is a delicious, vibrant pink. And next, I once again aligned the next stem section and stamped it in Color Sweets. I love to use the Simon Says Stamp positively saturated inks. They're perfect for solid stamping. They do not stain stamps or my fingers for that matter, and they are very easy to clean. I did manage to leave an inky fingerprint on one of the panels. I'm not sure how well you can see that on camera, but it was pretty obvious to me. So that's why I always try and make two backgrounds in case one ends up with a boo-boo. I did manage to save the background. I used a sanding eraser and I sanded the paper to the point where the ink wasn't visible. It was just barely noticeable, but since I knew I was going to do additional stamping over it, it was okay and I let it be. So I aligned the next stamp section and stamped it using the bubblegum ink color. Now this particular ink, not this particular color, but this type of ink, this formula, does look a bit uneven at first, sometimes splotchy, but you have to give it time to dry. Once it dries, it starts to look so much better and a lot more even, and the colors lighten too. And you just have to remember, give it at least 5 minutes to dry and the colors will look different and the stamping will look different as well. The next section was stamped in color Peachy, so we are moving on to the orange colors. Now, I didn't want to do true orange, but I wanted more of a softer tone here, so I went with the peachy tones. Now, I did cut this section out of my card, so you could have skipped stamping this part or this section, but I wasn't sure which section I would be removing, so I wanted to stamp all of the sections just in case to be able to see the entire background before I decided which section I would remove for the rest of my stamping. The next color I used was Cantaloupe, so a somewhat softer orange, and the last two sections were stamped using Citrine and Sunbeam. At one point, my camera stopped recording the last bit of stamping as I ran out of space in my memory card and I didn't notice it, but thankfully it was just that one last section, so nothing important was skipped. Here are what the finished backgrounds look like. Delicious rainbow of color. I trimmed one of the backgrounds to 4¼ by 5½ inches. And next I cut a section out using my scissors. Cutting a stem section out gave me a blank space to do my further stamping, although like I said, I could have skipped stamping that colorful section to begin with, but I did want to see the full background first before deciding which section to remove. Next, I pulled images from the On the Horizon stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I have a lovely cluster of palm trees and I'm stamping them directly onto the card base. I have the bottom background section placed over the card base for alignment and placement purposes. I want the trees to start just right above the bottom section. I'm stamping the trees in VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto my card base, so I'm stamping them directly onto the card background or the card base. And I'm also adding then the top section of the panel, my colorful stamping, aligning it with the top edge of the card base and stamping the trees onto the top section as well. Now the top section will be popped up on my card to add dimension, so I'm continuing my stamped design onto that popped section. I'm also adding a sentiment, Missing You, and stamping it in the same black ink in between the two color sections. This stamp set also has some images of the birds up in the sky, and I love to use those to add movement to my projects. I'm stamping them in a cluster around the palm trees and around the sentiment. With the stamping done, all that's left to do now is to adhere everything. I've added foam adhesive squares to the back of my colorful panels, and I'm adhering those to the card base, aligning with the bottom and the top edge of the card. One final touch is to add a couple of sequins. I opted to go with white sequins here as I already have quite a lot of color on my card. So here's a look at the finished project. I hope you like it. If you make a card inspired by this video, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.